Now they're aboard their alien vessel. Okay, and yeah, this is the part that I've kind of been dreading this whole time because nothing happens, so I'm just going to skip it. They go and they eat food on the Tau ship, and they discover basically that the Tau, instead of having 5 fingers on each hand, they have 4 fingers on each hand. So they count in series of 8. Like, so instead of going 10, 20, it goes 8, 16, 24, etc. And that's how the Tau count. We watch as a small opening appears in the floor, and the drone drifts up into sight, the aperture closing behind it. It hovers over the captain and warbles something in Tau, before disappearing back the way it came. He turns to our interpreter and says something long-winded, looking occasionally at us as he does so. Poor Lacunas replies in length, also looking at us, and the captain nods in agreement. It appears you have arrived on the bridge at a fortuitous time, he tells us with a slight nod. Shortly, we will undergo the transition into the Vash Anan, which I believe you call warp space. He directs our attention to the large screen, which pans across the stars before settling to a reddish blob. As the ship powers closer, the blob expands into a spiral pattern, erratically expanding and contracting on itself. It shifts color too, and sometimes disappears from sight altogether. The captain explains something to poor Lacunas. Ahead is the Shokara, the watercast Tau informs us with due grandeur, which you call the lens, or window, perhaps. We will pass through the Shokara into space and ride the currents within. You have to use warp holes or lenses or whatever to enter the warp? Asks Oriel, feigning only slight interest. The Fio have yet to find a successful method of creating an artificial Shokara, admits poor Lacuna sheepishly. However, he rallies well. It will only be a matter of time before the problems they have so far encountered are resolved. And when inside the warp, you navigate how? I am unsure of the details. I will confer to El Savon. He answers slowly, obviously a little put on by this sudden line of questioning. I guess warp travel isn't one of the things they've mastered yet. Not that anyone can really master it, if you ask me. However, it's obvious from poor Lacunas' reaction that he'd rather not discuss the shortcoming. After a long discussion with the captain, during which the interpreter does most of the talking, poor Lacunas turns back to us. He pauses for a couple of seconds, obviously collecting his thoughts and working out what to say. The captain informs me that the ship navigates along an extensive network of pre-designated pathways, he announces, not quite hiding his faltering confidence. He glances back at the captain once before continuing. El Savon says that powerful beacons allow him to travel between our planetary systems with great speed and accuracy. For instance, we shall be arriving at Malek, our destination, within 6 rota. From what I know of your time partitioning, that will be approximately 4 of your human days. And these beacons allow you to talk to the other worlds whilst traveling, perhaps? The colonel presses on. I only ask so that Imperial Commander Oriel's arrival be properly announced and anticipated. Sly bastard, I think to myself. For Lacunas is in a really difficult position now. He either has to tell us whether they can communicate whilst in warp space, a handy piece of information to know, or risk offending his honored guest by not answering. In the end, after another brief talk with El Saban, he opts to answer, although whether truthfully or not, I can't tell. A Corvessa piloted vessel is used for communication between ships in transit and our worlds, and for sending of messages to the widespread outposts of our sizable empire, Orlacunas duly informs us, using the opportunity to try and scare us away by talking about the size of the Tau Empire. I remain unimpressed, though. Given time and no distractions, I haven't got a doubt that should the Emperor will it, we could snuff out this jumped up species. They're just lucky we have to deal with the Tyranids. I suspect their empire would be swarming with Navy ships and Imperial Guard regiments otherwise. Enjoy your lives while they last, I think to myself. Glad that in some small way I might be playing my part in their downfall. It also shows how little they know about the Imperium if they think they can threaten us by talking about numbers. I bet there's more of us on a single hive world than they've got in their whole empire. As I ponder this, I watch the warp hole growing larger on the screen, and I have to admit, it starts to worry me. The warp's an uncontrollable beast, which can tear ships apart or fling them off route to wander lost between the stars. The idea of diving in through this opening and drifting along the currents of the Immaterium doesn't fill me with joy. I don't even like the idea of a ship with proper warp engines and navigators on board, and all this reliance on spiritless technology, and a place where souls can be given form, makes me shudder. The others are fidgeting a bit as well, attention fixed on screen. I spare them only the briefest of glances as I concentrate on the whirl of power that we're being sucked into. The small warp tempest swirls ever closer and closer, distorting the appearance of the stars behind it, twisting them and stretching them into swirls and lines of light. I feel like we're going faster and faster, being relentlessly sucked in, and a brief panic begins to grip until I realize that we're just approaching at the same pace, and it was all my mind playing tricks on me. I'm glad for the heavy cowl concealing my face as my nerves fray just a little bit more. Another minute or so passes until the warp hole is filling the entire screen, and its outer edges disappear from view. The shifting colors are dizzy to watch as this rhythmic pulsing that can now be made out at its center. I actually feel sick looking at it, the mesmerizing effect of the sight combining with my nervousness to make my stomach lurch a couple of times. I'm glad when the screen goes blank for a moment, the nauseating view replaced by a schematic of obscure symbols and ever-changing Tau writing. An alien standing at a panel to our left calls something out, and the captain nods once. "We are entering the Shokara now," Orlacunas announces, totally at ease again, that we've stopped bugging him with questions. I would have expected some hectic activity messages. I would have expected some hectic activity messages being sent from different parts of the ship, officers bustling around busily. It's not like that at all. The Tau stand at their posts in silence, monitoring their positions, without a word being spoken. Everything is conducted in the same calm, ordered manner that the Tau seem to employ in everything they do. They've obviously done this many times before, and such is their faith in their machines, however displaced they may be, that they have no thoughts of failure. Another Tau speaks up next, and the captain says something to our guide, bowing his head in Oriel's direction. El Savon wishes to inform you that we have safely navigated the Shokara, and now his duties are complete for the day, and he would be honored for you to be his guests at his dining table this evening, Orlacunas translates for us. Oriel nods to Schaefer, who turns and looks at the captain. Please convey Imperial Commander Oriel's thanks for El Savon's gracious invitation, which we will, of course, accept, the colonel says, addressing the captain directly. Orlacunas repeats the fanciful acceptance speech in Tau, and the captain nods again before turning and leaving through a side door. I shall escort you back to your quarters now, if that is acceptable to the Imperial Commander, Orlacunas says stiffly, keeping his gaze on Oriel. There's something going on here, some petty etiquette or diplomatic statement being made which I'm not aware of. Oriel just nods and starts to walk out, forcing Orlacunas to hurry forward to keep pace with him. The colonel watches us all file past, and I hang back and fall into step beside him before I realize I'm almost marching alongside, I shorten my paces while I'm practiced and hope nobody noticed. What was that about? I asked the colonel in a hushed voice, not turning my head towards him. Word games, he says curtly, glancing back at me. The kind of banter that rulers and politicians seem to crave. Imperial Commander Oriole has demonstrated that he too can talk through an intermediary. So what does that mean? I say, keeping my voice low. It means nothing, except that our translator is more confused about his honored guest than he was when we arrived on board, the colonel explains. There are rules governing how to behave in certain situations like this, and I suspect the Tau take them very seriously. At least from the water caste like Por Lacunas. Imperial Commander Oriole is trying to break a few of them to see what happens. Hearing the colonel's rough pronunciation of the Tau name makes me smile, luckily concealed within my hood. It makes me wonder about all those scribes I've seen before, busily doing their jobs, probably secretly smirking at us and pulling faces all the time. If everything goes to plan, this verbal fencing will be the only combat we see before the mission starts. I've never been on a mission where everything went to plan, I reply, serious again. Neither have I, the colonel admits ominously. Por Lacunas leaves us saying that he will return when it is time for us to join the captain. Our kit has been transferred from the shuttle, and we pick up our rooms. I notice our rooms are cooler than they were before, verging on being cold now rather than hot. We sort out, okay, and I'm gonna take, since this is the second novel, yeah, I'm gonna take this. They shower and they figure out how Tau showers work, and then they eat more food. And more diplomacy happens. I am reading The Last Chancers. It's a book about a kill team, and what a kill team is basically is they're expendable people. Their job right now is to go to a Tau world and initiate an assassination mission. The Tau are helping them. So basically, they're assassinating a character who's kind of like Commander Farsight. Because the Tau don't want any renegades, and the Imperium could only this is the most Tau that the Imperium can kill without the Tau committing reprisals. No. Por Lacunas. I hope I'm pronouncing Por Lacunas' name right. Just sit right. Okay. Okay, they meet Coldwind too. Our quarters are a slightly more grandiose version of those aboard the ship. As before, there's a central chamber, this time with a large central cushion and three smaller ones in a triangle around it. There are 10 bedrooms connected to the living area. We barely have time to wash and refresh ourselves before a chiming noise attracts our attention to the door. Ray Doran is waiting for us along the landing outside, and he asks us to accompany him to the upper floor while the state dinner is being held. Are all the rooms just like ours? Asked Tanya. Though whether out of curiosity or just trying to play her role, I'm not sure. Are these normal quarters or those specifically prepared for off-world visitors? I think she's almost about to say aliens. Then I realized that they're still the aliens, even if we're on their world. They are similar in design to our own habitations, Vredoran informs us, leading us along a hallway, which is colored a very pale blue, decorated by a thin frieze of Tau lettering about head high. If they are not suitable, I can arrange for rooms to be specifically prepared that are more suitable. We are not fully aware of all human needs. Tanya glances at Oriel, who shrugs. These quarters will be sufficient, thank you, she tells the Tau graciously. We follow the alien into the moving ramp that serves instead of a staircase, gently revolving around a central pillar that runs the height of the building. The inside is hollow. The 12 floors have circular landings with bridges that reach out from the conveyor, the rooms radiating outwards from there. The central column itself is startling. Glass or some other transparent substance that contains an ever-shifting mix of colored liquids that gently rise and fall along its length. Like all the stairwells I've seen, the mobile ramp has no handrails, and we crowd into the center near the column for fear of plummeting to our deaths. It's obviously the Tau that don't lose their footing very easily. I can see why. They seem to have a very they seem a very leisurely race. I've not seen anything except the drones hurrying around. Like everything to do with the Tau, their pace of life is calm and sedate as well. We reach the final landing and are led into the banqueting hall. It runs the entire circumference of the building, as far as I can tell. Its outside wall a continuous window, allowing a magnificent view of the city in every direction. Low, wide circular tables are arranged along the center of the room, disappearing to the left and the right, each surrounding by the now familiar seating cushions. Malik's star is just setting, and we wait for the other guests to arrive. We stand at the window and look out over the settlement, bathed in the rosy glow of the coming twilight. For the first time since we arrived, the city starts to come alive as darkness descends. The sunset casts a warm tint across the land's white buildings, softening the glare, and lights from thousands of windows spring into life from the space of only a few seconds. Strips of luminescence run the length of the roadways and bridges, adding to the spectacle. And as the star rapidly dips beneath the horizon, I'm amazed at the glorious array of twinkling starlight and iridescent rainbows that replace the severe whiteness of the city in daylight. A steady stream of yellow and blue lights moves across the roadways as vehicles soon form a constant stream. Looking to my right, I can see the spaceport atop the hill, blazing with beacons and landing guides, geometric shapes, shining in red, green, blue, and white, making an almost dizzying pattern from this angle. The bright landing jets of some starship erupt into life as it takes off, and I watch white sparks ascend into the clouds, underlit by the last rays of the day. That's pretty impressive, Strelly says casually. Can you imagine how much power it takes just to run all those lights? Pretty lights and baubles, snorts Morik, turning away. Glittering decorations that impudently seek to outmatch the stars. Only a race so blind to the obscenities of technology would try and rival the beauty of the Emperor's heavens. Beats living in the dark, Tanya says, pragmatically gazing at the bright array blazing across the land as far as we can see. No light can hide the darkness in an alien soul, Morik sneers from behind us. We turn as we hear others entering. 4 fire warriors, fully armored and armed, precede a young-looking Tau wearing a robe of several differently colored layers. In his hand, he carries a short rod, a glittering gem at its tip. They pay no attention to us, but move out of sight, around the bed. Ambassador Coldwind follows soon after and directs us towards a table a little away from the door, with the view of the spaceport out of the window. He follows our gaze outside. Magnificent, is it not? He says, bobbing his head slightly. We adore the night, you see. When our ancestors were still young, we lived in the dry and arid heat of Tau, and spent much of the hot day sheltering. At night, that is when we prefer to live our lives. You're a nocturnal race? Quidlin asks quickly. Only culturally, replies Coldwind. Biologically, we are like humans, capable of diurnal and nocturnal activity. Our traditions place great regard on the night and the pleasures she brings. Who was the Tau who came in before you? Oriel asks, sitting down at the table and motioning for the rest of us to join him. I keep forgetting he is supposed to be a guest of honor. That was Aunla Shiva Runal, he replies curtly. A member of the Ethereals, Oriel says with sudden interest, glancing along the room in the direction the mysterious Tau went. Yes, Coldwind confirms, obviously not eager to discuss the matter. Why so suddenly quiet? I ask him, leaning my elbows on the table. The colonel gives me a harsh glare, and I snatch them back, realizing my sleeves have flopped back, showing the scars and wheals around my wrists from the time I was in prison. I don't know if the Tau would understand where they're from, but I guess it's better to avoid questions. We do not discuss matters concerning the Aon with outsiders, even those who are our allies, the ambassador replies sternly. Is he not here to welcome me? Oriel asks in surprise. He shares the same room. That is sufficient to honor the arrival of an outsider, Coldwind tells Oriel without any sign of embarrassment. The ambassador looks up and nods to an approaching Tau. It was getting too tiring holding that book together. So I'll go to this book. This one has an ugly cover. The other one has a prettier cover. But this book is still together. The ambassador looks up and nods to an approaching Tau, taller than the ones we've seen and quite broad. He carries himself like a warrior, I tell myself, noting the light swagger to his walk and the hard stare he gives us as he stops next to the table. This is Chassel, Varula Mianchi Elan, Coldwell introduces the newcomer. May I present Imperial Commander Oriel of His Most Holy Majesty, the Emperor of Terra. I go to stand, but note that Coldwell remains seated. Obviously, it's not a sign of respect here. I should have remembered that from the captain's dinner aboard the starship. Welcome, Malik. Address me as Shah Elan, Commander Oriel, the fire warrior says. Dipping his head a fraction in indifference. His voice is much deeper than that of the other Tau I've met, his accent far more pronounced. Now, I'm not exactly an expert on Tau body language yet, but he doesn't look too pleased to be here. He seats himself opposite the table, pushing his way between Quidlin and Tanya. Shah Ceylon is an old friend of mine and a high-ranking officer in the Shahs here on Melik, explains Coldwind, either oblivious to his friend's discomfort or simply ignoring it. We sit in a slightly uncomfortable silence for a minute or so before the colonel speaks up. Then the colonel speaks up. Forgive my ignorance, Shah Ceylon. I know little of the structure here of your military, he says quietly, the most polite I've ever heard him with anyone before. Ever. Do you have the rank of Chassel, is that right? I'm Chassel, he answers proudly. How many warriors do you command? The colonel, the colonel continues, scratching his ear in a nonchalant fashion. I command one. What? He glances over to Coldwind for help, who answers in town. In Tau. I command one cadre of warriors. At present, they number 56. And your superior is? And your superior is? Oriel interrupts, still affecting his assumed indifference. Chasso Virla Monti Ir Shi Montka, Chasselan replies after a moment's thought. Chassot controlling all the Shahs on Milek. We digest this for a while, waiting for the food to arrive. When it does, it's a bewildering assortment of dishes carried by drones, laden down with vegetables, fruits, fragrant rice, and thick crusted pastries. More of the crunchy, biscuity things I took a liking for on the ship, plus jugs of honey-colored and deep purple juices. A few of them I recognize from the captain's dinner, but most of them are new to us. Unlike the shelf arrangement on the ship, there seems to be no formal order, and we all tuck in. Coldwine and Shah Ceylon included. Both the Tau seemed to lighten up as we began to eat, recommending various foods, commenting to each other in Tau, with Coldwine occasionally translating for us and Shah Ceylon. A couple of times I have to remind myself that Shah Ceylon is not in on the conspiracy, and stop myself from saying something that would give us away. I can tell the colonel is also eager to get what information he can about finding the Tau from the Fire Warrior leader, but is holding back. Despite the unnatural but vaguely pleasing surroundings, I lose my appetite quickly, and I'm soon just picking at small tidbits out of politeness. As we eat, I watch Melek's twin moons rise across the night sky, and in the moonlight, the city changes again. Most of the lights dim, leaving just the buildings glowing in a variety of colors, some looking silver or gold, others with a kind of pearly hue, yet others still dappled with glowing blues and purples. Our cities are planned and built so that they interact with the movement of the celestial bodies, taking their mood from the changing positions of the moons and stars, the colonel tells us, noticing the direction of my gaze. Do you have such spectacles on your worlds? I glance at the colonel, who gives a shrug, and I nod. I decide I can tell them the truth. There's no way Shah Ceylon could guess I wasn't a scribe just because of where I'm from. I come from a city that stretches 3 kilometers into the skies of Olympus, I tell the Tau, trying to make it sound as impressive as I can. There's no point letting them think they're the only ones who can build a fancy city. The lower levels are delved a similar distance into the rock. 1 billion humans live in that one city, and there are 13 such cities in my world. That cannot be, argues Shah Ceylon. That is more humans on one world than there are Tau in the Sept. We call them hive worlds from the busy nests of insects. There are many hive worlds in the Imperium and other kinds of worlds too. Many worlds? With this many humans? Chassel looks shocked and glares accusingly at Coldwind, muttering something in Tau. Coldwind answers back in a sharp fashion, as far as I can tell, anyhow. The rest of the meal is eaten in uncomfortable silence. It was. Oh, she heard it. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, it should. It is Coldwind who meets us the next morning. The day is already beginning to warm up as the ground car glides up onto one of the high aerial roads. I pay more attention to the journey this time, watching as other vehicles pass us in the opposite direction. Floating cars like the ones we are in, long articulated transports, small pod-like conveyors carrying a single Tau. I notice how many drones there are as well. They seem to be everywhere, flitting along the roads, skimming in and out of the buildings, weaving their way through the bridges and walkways. We must leave tonight, Coldwind says suddenly, drawing my attention back inside the vehicle. I have received word that Ovar will be departing Estau shortly. If we do not move as soon as possible, the opportunity may be dismissed. You say we. Does that mean you are coming with us? I shall meet you there, he replies evenly. Ovar is assembling many mercenaries to supplement his own fire warriors, and in the guise of mercenaries, you will arrive on Estau and enter the employ of Ovar. I have made this possible and must travel to Ovar to ensure that all the necessary records are completed in a fashion that does not link you to me in any way. Covering your back, then, Trost laughs. You seem to trust us not to give away your secret. If you were to reveal the connection, the records will support my argument that such an arrangement did not exist. The ambassador answers smoothly, not put out in the least. Also, you have nothing to gain from such a revelation, as popular opinion would be far more concerned with eliciting recompense from the Imperium than questioning my role in the affair. Nobody is going to reveal anything to anyone, Oriel says sternly, giving us each a hard look before turning to Coldwind. Has our starship arrived yet? Several days ago, the vessel you described to me has achieved orbit, the ambassador confirms with a nod. I have also arranged for you to be conveyed by lifter to the outer regions of the system so that you may engage your warp engines as soon as possible. What do you mean conveyed? Schaefer asks suspiciously. Do not be alarmed. It is a standard procedure, Coldwin assures us. Often, when dealing with alien vessels, we use the superior acceleration capabilities of our own ships to give them a boost, as you would say. So, how long do you expect it'll take us to reach Estau? Strelly asked from the back end of the ground car. It is a short journey, relatively speaking. I would estimate 3, perhaps 4 rota, he replies after a moment's thought. That's just over 2 days, Oriel says, glancing over to Coldwind for confirmation, who gives a nod. Not long at all. We'll use the time to make our final preparations. Good. I believe everything is in order then. The ambassador seems pleased. We spend the rest of the day going over the next part of the plan. The ambassador briefs us more as he escorts us around various local places of interest. We pass close to the palace of the Ethereals, a towering edifice with dozens of skyways webbing out from the central spire, and have our first look at a real Fire Warrior battle dome, a huge building that can train thousands of warriors under its arching roof. Coldwind becomes particularly animated during our tour through the Watercast district, going on at length about the dozens of domes and towers full of administrators, correlating information from all across the planet and nearby worlds. The stop-start nature of the conversations means we have to backtrack a lot, so we're all clear on what's going on, but I think I get it in the end. There's a decommissioned ex-Navy transport in orbit, a small vessel, barely capable of warp speed, which will take us to Estau and Brightsword. We will land, sign up for Brightsword's army, and then keep out of trouble until it is time to strike. When a Tau commander makes his final pre-invasion inspection, we hit hard and fast, shoot the bastard in the head, and then lay it out as quick as we can. Coldwind assures us that in the mayhem and confusion, we should be able to get away into the orbit without too much difficulty. I have my doubts. It was the same problem with Court Norum. Getting in was difficult enough, but it was getting out that nearly killed me. Midway through the afternoon, the colonel returns to our quarters and says that we have a few hours to make any final preparations before departing. That evening, just as the sun is dipping behind the tall, domed buildings, Coldwind turns up yet again with a floating car to take us back to the spaceport. I've just had a thought, Tanya says, as we smoothly overtake a long tanker of some kind. What happens to you, Coldwind, when all this goes off? I mean, you won't be able to entirely deny any involvement with us. Our story is that you are renegades acting without authority, the Tau ambassador replies calmly. In the unfortunate event that I am somehow implicated, I will, of course, support this story. Rather foolishly, I have trusted the evil humans, and Ovar has paid the price. So you look incompetent rather than treacherous, I laugh harshly. That won't do your career much good. If that comes to pass, I am almost certain that I will lose much prestige and rank. Coldwind agrees with a nod, still seeming at ease with the thought. However, my personal circumstances and career are secondary to the needs of the Tau Va. Would you risk having your life ruined for this? Tanya asks, leaning forward. This Tau Va must be pretty important. I certainly risk much for the Tau Va, it is true, answers Coldwind slowly. However, ask yourself this. Why do you risk even more than I do for your distant emperor? Nobody replies as we ponder this. I have the quick answer, though. Some would say it's avoiding the issue. I risk everything for the emperor and mankind because it's better than any of the other options. I remember a preacher once. He came to the hive factories and held a great mass. He wanted to bring together the different houses to the worship of the emperor. It didn't work. The mass turned into a riot, then a battle, then a full scale trade war. And I think he got shot by accident, though nobody wished him any harm, really. Anyway, this preacher was extolling to us to work for the emperor and to fight for the emperor. He quoted from the Litanies of Faith, or perhaps some other holy book. I can't really remember. I was very young, perhaps 3 at the time. He said there were 2 types of people. There were those who worked and fought for mankind and the emperor. They were the ones who dedicated themselves to an ideal bigger than them. They were the ones who would be gloried in the afterlife when the emperor took them. Then there were the others, the leeches he called, them sucking life and blood from the rest of us. They had no purpose beyond themselves. And when they died, there was only the abyssal chaos to greet them. I must have had an impression. It must have had an impression on me, though I didn't realize that until I was in the 13th Legion. We're all shocked out of our thoughts when the right front hand side of the ground car explodes, sending silvery metal spinning in all directions and causing the vehicle to plow into the roadway, nearly spinning over and tossing us in all directions. I don't remember seeing a blast or missile, but I guess someone must have shot it at us. What the frag? I shout, jumping to my feet. I hear the tings of small arms rattling off the transport as we all spill out of the carrying compartment to shelter behind the bulk of the ground car. I check out everyone to see if they're all right, but the padded seats and floor mean that none of us will have worse than bruises in a few hours. Where's it coming from? Shouts Tanya, scanning the buildings around us. There's a spire-like tower where we are passing, standing alone amongst the elegant tangle of roads and bridges. Behind us is a complex of interlocked domes around a central spherical hub, but with no visible windows. Further along the road is another building, still being assembled. Grav cranes hover over it, winching in large slabs of whatever material it is that the Tau use. The construction site, I snap, just as Tanya says the same, and I point. It's about 300 meters away, with plenty of cover, yet open routes of routes of escape in every direction. I hurl myself to my feet again, and I'm about to start towards the buildings when Oriole grabs my robe and flings me bodily to the floor. You're a scribe, you stupid idiots, he hisses. Not a bloody space marine. Sorry, I forgot. I apologize as more bullets rattle into the roadway. I glance around. Nobody seems to have been hit. My heart is pounding, the suddenness of the attack galvanizing my body into action. I have to fight hard against the urge to get myself a weapon and go on the offensive. Who do you think is attacking us? The colonel bellows at Coldwind. There are a few fundamentalists who believe we are too tolerant of other species, particularly humans, Coldwin replies, cowering underneath the shattered remains of the ground car. The Shahs hunt them down when they can, but there are always one or two who refuse to see the wisdom of our policies. It's at this point that the Shahs, the fire warriors, choose to make their entrance, judging by the speed that they've got. I guess they've been following us around all day. Not that unexpected, considering Oriole is supposed to be a very important dignitary. I don't know where they came from, but suddenly 5 battlesuits are landing on a roadway in front of us, screaming groundwards on their jetpacks. As they land, their feet gouge holes in the surface of the road, their knee joints and lower leg structure compacting smoothly to absorb the landing impact. No sooner had they arrived on their feet than they opened fire. As the hovering cranes lift themselves out of the line of fire, salvos of missiles erupt from shoulder mounted pods on 2 of the suits. The other 3 leap forward, powering away into the air with hissing bounds, their multiple weapons spitting bullets and plasma bolts into the half built dome. Something erupts over our heads, and a massive blast of energy sails between the advancing battlesuits. Its detonation sending a massive fountain of debris into the air. A shadow passes over us, and I glance up. It's a Tau tank, gliding above the roadway, passing overhead. It's big, bigger than any grav vehicle I've ever seen. Though it's not many, that's not many to be fair. Like the spaceship we traveled on, it flattens and widens at the front, almost a hammerhead. The expanded front houses 2 weapons pods on either side, just forward of what looks to be a cockpit, fitted with the same multi-barreled cannons that I noticed on the battlesuits. The guns track left and right, seeking targets. The back end flanked by heavy engines, which are tilted slightly downward at the moment to push the whole thing slowly forward. It's much blockier, topped by a turret with an offset cannon. The gun itself is huge, easily 3 or 4 meters long and blocky. As it passes by, the whine of the engines making my ears ring, the tank opens fire again, spitting a ball of energy into the target zone. Its aim slightly adjusted from the previous shot. I think we should all get out of here, mumbles Strelly, glancing back along the road. Traffic from behind us has slowly started to snarl up, and many of the vehicles have settled onto the ground, out of the way of the advancing tank, providing cover for us to escape. I see the Tau abandon their vehicles and flee away from the fight. I look around and see the aircast dome nearby, in the shape of a craft lifting up in the air a short distance away. We're within walking distance of the spaceport. We just head for the shuttle, I say to the others, and Oriole nods. Yes, once we're there. Oh. Yes, once we're there, Coldwind can get us clearance to leave, and we can get out of here with the minimum of fuss, the Inquisitor agrees. Yes, they will send another vehicle for you soon, Coldwind agrees. It may be wiser to avoid any escalation of the situation. Close scrutiny of your presence here would be undesirable. We can't carry all our gear, Strelly points out, nodding at the pile of bags and chests now spilled from the storage compartment of the wrecked ground car. We don't need it anymore, I argue. Once we're out of here, our cover story changes. We have to dump it all anyway. Very well, double back. The less official attention we get, the better, Oriole says quickly, running past us in a stooped stance, keeping the smoldering wreck of the ground car between him and any attackers. We follow swiftly, and within a couple of minutes are out of the area and on our own, hidden in the shadow under a taut blue awning that extends for several hundred meters from the side of one of the nearby domes. I must apologize for this attack, Coldwind says as we catch our breath, his composure regained. I hope this does not compromise the mission any more than necessary. Just get us to the spaceport and to our ship, snaps Oriole, stalking away. We head to the shuttle, on foot this time, heading down fairly empty heading down fairly empty back streets after Coldwind. The few Tau that see us give us odd looks, but we try to look as if we're out on a stroll rather than fleeing for our lives, and most of them only give us a glance before going past. Coldwind uses his position of authority to get us past the Fire Warrior security at the spaceport without any questions, but it's only once we're in the shuttle, heading for orbit, that we begin to relax a little. Coldwind isn't with us. He'll be meeting us at Estau. The ambassador is traveling in his own vessel, as it would appear. Very strange if he were to arrive there on a mercenary transport, so we're completely free to talk about him while he's not here. The Tau didn't take their time rescuing us, Strelly says, slouching comfortably in his padded leather seat. I would like to know how they knew we would be there, Morik says, looking at Oriole. And if they knew that, what else might they have found out? Imperial Commander Oriole must have been under Fire Warrior protection since he landed, the colonel says scornfully. If you had paid more attention, you would have noticed the transport craft that was shadowing us for the last 2 days, a few hundred meters up and about a kilometer behind us. But you were all too busy looking at the buildings and at the Tau. I've never heard of Tau dissidents before, states Oriole, deep in thought. If such radicals did exist, then the whole subterfuge with Brightsword would be entirely unnecessary. No, Coldwind was lying to us about that. I could sense that. I also think Coldwind was anticipating the attack. He didn't seem to be scared about it, as you'd expect a non-combatant to be. Perhaps he's just brave for his caste, suggests Tanya, earning herself a withering look from Oriole. No, there's more going on here than we bargained for, the Inquisitor says slowly. The car was hit with the first shot, but in such a way that none of us were injured. After that, the shooting was pretty poor, if it was a shot at all. Did anyone see a muzzle flash before we were hit, or a rocket or shell? We all shake our heads. No, this seems to be orchestrated to me, the Inquisitor continues. He thinks we are more stupid than we are, which I don't believe for a moment. Or he's playing some kind of game, which I don't quite understand yet. Maybe it's part of his own story, so he can explain why he left in such a hurry, muses Tanya, and we all look at her in amazement. Her explanation does make some sense. Well, I know all about distractions, lures, and false trails, so don't give me that funny look. There's more to being a sniper than just aiming straight, she says petulantly, turning her head to look out of the shuttle window. Well, whether it was for our benefit or his, I don't know what Coldwind is playing at, or what purpose the attack serves, Oriole says, unbuckling his safety harness and standing up. But from now on, keep a close eye on our friendly ambassador. The colonel walks out to the front chamber, followed by the colonel. I wouldn't trust that slimy cretin as far as I could throw him, agrees Trost with a sneer. There is no such thing as a trustworthy alien, Morik says emphatically. We all nod in agreement.